China is attempting to overpower the United States by employing a tried and true tactic. It appears more eager than ever to begin aiding Russia's escalation of power in Ukraine through the sale of arms. The US threatened China with consequences if it agreed with Moscow's frantic requests for arms and ammunition. Why do US authorities think China will provide Russia with lethal support? What would happen if China gave Russia lethal aid in the Ukraine war? What's happening between the US, China, and Russia will be examined in this video. Any considerable increase in China's aid to Russia would change the course of the war. Yet a year after the start of this war, why would Xi think about doing such a thing? Chinese military strategy experts argue that the deliberate ambiguity has a bigger aim, and the vagueness of US threats is likely an attempt to thwart Beijing's tried and true strategies for evading Western constraints. China has been debating for months whether to back the Russian military, especially since mid-March, when proof of Russia's mistakes and failures on the battlefield in Ukraine became widely known. At the time, US intelligence also revealed that China was frightened by the brutality of Russian warfare strategies, which have gotten worse over time. China has proven to be an important commercial partner for Russia as one of the leading producers of goods like electronics, drones, and car parts worldwide. Beijing hasn't taken any sides in the conflict officially. China, Turkey, and some former Soviet republics have provided Russia with goods. The goods include raw materials, smartphones, automobiles, and computer chips. These goods could be beneficial for both the people and the armed forces. The China-Russia no-limits relationship that was formalized prior to the war would be a factor in China's decision to provide Russia with arms, but a minor one. Three other significant factors stand out. China's plans for aggression towards its neighbors, especially Taiwan, may be influenced by the response to its potential support for Russia. The Chinese leadership may intentionally be provoking a response from NATO and the United States to gauge their reactions to such actions. China wants to assess the West's response for potential future aggression and gain some confidence in how they may react. This could include a move on Taiwan, although it's a different situation from the current conflict. Second, China has no desire for the conflict in Ukraine to end soon. China would rather the US and Europe continue to supply Ukraine with their most advanced weapons and remain focused on Europe. This strategy would be similar to how the US was diverted from the Pacific during the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts in the previous 2 decades. In the harsh calculations of the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army, a prolonged conflict that would be disastrous for the Ukrainian people would be advantageous to both sides. At last, losing to Russia is not in China's best interests. As a fellow member of the exclusive but potent techno-authoritarian club, a loss for Russia would be seen as a serious blow to Xi's narrative of a collapsing West. Supporting Russia might subject China to a harsh regime of economic penalties. The US president would face tremendous pressure to censor China for aiding Russia. This would severely disrupt global trade. Both China and the US would prefer to stay out of that situation. Russia has lost direct access to popular Western consumer brands and cutting-edge technology, such as semiconductors. People and businesses from various countries have provided Russia with cheaper knockoffs of these products. These knockoffs are made in China or other nations. It appears that products are getting to Russia, albeit via a longer route. The number of goods sent by European nations to nations like Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan has skyrocketed. The Russian economy remains slow but unharmed after 1 year of the war. Officials from the administration are now expressing fear that China would further support Russia's intervention by giving Moscow deadly weaponry. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said this week that China might be planning to help Russia kill people while invading Ukraine. He has issued a warning that China may be preparing to provide Russia with arms and ammunition, despite the lack of concrete proof of such activity. Blinken said, "I'm hopeful but very realistic that China will receive that message because it's coming from many other nations that do not want to see China helping and abetting in a significant sense Russia's war effort in Ukraine." On Sunday, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan warned China there would be serious implications if it continued to give Moscow deadly assistance in its assault on Ukraine. From our vantage point, this battle actually poses significant challenges for Beijing. China will also have to decide for itself how to proceed and whether to offer military support. But if it takes that turn, China will pay a price for it. And I believe it is something the leaders of China are considering as they decide, Sullivan told CNN. On February 24, 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, and that was a year ago. But significant events in Ukraine 9 years ago this week laid the groundwork for the current conflict. To cover the Maidan Revolution in Independence Square in late February 2014, CBC sent a team to Kyiv. Russia illegally annexed Crimea with an illegitimate referendum. The 9-year anniversary of Russia's takeover of the Crimean Peninsula of Ukraine was also observed on Sunday. On Sunday, the U.S. State Department reaffirmed that Crimea is Ukraine. According to the department spokeswoman Ned Price, the United States does not and will never accept Russia's claimed annexation of the peninsula. He also called Russia's 2014 invasion of Crimea a clear violation of international law, as well as of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The Biden administration's support for Ukraine, concluding that triumph meant retaking Crimea, was not made clear by Sullivan. He said, "The Ukrainians will decide what happens with Crimea in the framework of this war and a settlement of this war with the help of the United States." This will worry Western strategists as well as the leaders of Ukraine, NATO, and the United States, especially in light of Chinese President Xi Jinping's peace offer and the Chinese foreign minister's meeting with Vladimir Putin. NATO is increasingly concerned that China is preparing to give military aid to Russia at a press conference earlier this week. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said, "We are also growing increasingly concerned that China may be planning to give lethal support for Russia's war." Stoltenberg was questioned about whether the military alliance is aware of any signs that China is getting ready to do this. "We have noticed some indications that they may be preparing for it. And of course, the United States and its NATO partners have been advising against that because this should not be the case. China shouldn't aid Russia in its illegal war," he said. Stoltenberg stated that it would be blatantly illegal for China to provide Russia with lethal assistance. The West has frequently urged China to reevaluate its ties with Russia. President Biden and his top officials committed to imposing more measures to thwart Russia's attempts to fight a war against Ukraine. But the administration is concentrating more and more on China's contribution to Russia's acquisition of commodities with both civilian and military applications. Speaking on Monday in Kyiv, President Biden stated that this week, the United States and its allies would announce additional initiatives aimed at combating sanctions evasion. He did not specify whether those steps would be targeted at Russia or its commercial partners. The following day in Warsaw, he remarked, "Together, we have ensured that Russia is paying the price for its abuses." Supporters of the U.S. government's stance argue that it is necessary to put pressure on China to discourage it from supporting Russia. On the other hand, some people think that China has its own strategic interests and will not be easily swayed by U.S. pressure. Some also argue that the U.S. government should focus on dialogue and diplomacy instead of making threats. In conclusion, China won't desert Russia, but that doesn't imply it will do all in its power to help Russia win the war. China has a lot to gain from the war consuming more of the West's attention and weapons, but it stands to lose far more if it gets involved right away. There is no question that such an intervention would seriously deteriorate relations between China, Europe, and the U.S. It is unclear at this time if the Chinese leadership would be willing to take a chance on the significant diplomatic and financial consequences of assisting Russia. The Chinese will view their support as legitimate and justified if the conflict turns into Russia's self-defense. That's it for today's video. How will China react to this caution? What will it take to put an end to the pain and senseless slaughter brought on by Russia's war on Ukraine? Comment down below what your thoughts are, and don't forget to click on the bell icon after clicking on the subscribe button.